versed in, so it shouldn't be hard.
For once.
Was that passive aggressive?
For once, Smud Boy.
Some of the more, no, I mean in the fact that some of the more recent ones is like the rest of us have been talking.
Of course.
All right. Good afternoon, folks. On the Smudcast number 372 on writing, killing characters, ! Harry Potter, Stephen King, and Terabithia, I'm assuming, is also a fantasy. Bridge to Terabithia.
Terabithia, yes.
Yeah, this is from Hello Future Me. This came out about 2 weeks ago. So it's a 31 or 32 minute video, and this is a topic I'm very well versed in. Most writers are, most readers are, if you know anything about reading and writing. Death is a hugely encompassing topic, whether you're talking about dying or killing or actually killing or having it being a mystery of who killed who. It's a huge topic all throughout storytelling. So it's...
you have to do it right, or it's just
yeah, this goes all the way from a reverse procedural to an actual procedural to murder mysteries to classic murder mysteries to noirs to just adventure stories. There's all sorts of ways on how and why this works. And it's different based off genre, of course, but in general, it's like any other piece of writing. There's a certain way to do it, and why we do not like certain characters when they get killed, why it breaks our heart, why it makes us feel good when the bad guy gets
Enkidu!
When all kinds, killing is going to be in your story or in a story, or death is going to be in your story, whether you like it or not. And because it's kind of like salt in food, it's just everywhere. You can't escape it. Even when you don't think you added any salt, salt is in your food, and you're going to need to know how to deal with it. So
yes, and it's one of the oldest, most important elements in storytelling because it's part of just the human experience, which is why when Enkidu died, Gilgamesh cried like a girl, and it's written exactly like that in the epic. Okay. He cried like a girl for days.
Well,
say what you want about Final Fantasy being inaccurate as fuck compared to the original. At least they portray that aspect right.
Okay. Well,
before we start, I'm just confused a bit by the title. It probably wasn't intended, but killing characters, Harry Potter, Stephen King, His Dark Materials. Does this imply that Stephen King is a fictional character?
I think he's just trying to categorize his video as quickly as possible in a title. So he's probably...
The assumption is probably just taking as whatever Stephen King's things apply to this.
I guess a few Stephen King books. I don't know. Could be plays. Could be whatever. I don't know. I'm not a Stephen King fan. He's a great orator of his ideas. Just not a very good writer of his ideas. I think his stories are too big, and he needs to learn to cut out the fat because there's so much fat in his stories that they become tomes and big boring stories that they just get lost amidst all the genius in there. There is genius in there, but it's hard to find. So that's the problem with Stephen. Harry Potter, I don't know too much, but I think most people know enough of what the story is about. And Bridge to Terabithia is a very specific fantasy story. So lots to go.
I never got in my fantasy shelf to His Dark Materials. To the point I haven't even bought it yet. But I am aware of this story, very very roughly. It was recommended to me a couple times. So someday.
Yeah, it came out I think in the 70s or 80s because I know I heard about it when I was a kid. But at that time there were plenty of other things to read aside from that. And there's only one series, I believe. So I think it was originally done by C.S. Lewis. I can't recall, but the actual novel that was popularized was in the 70s. So
I remember a friend back in the day complained for months about how bad the Golden Compass movie was in comparison.
Oh, geez. I haven't even watched that.
He said it was just a hack together mess with random elements from the book. Okay.
Yeah, no, fantasy is... There's so much fantasy. Even if we were to ask one of our own fantasy authors on the Smudcast what he thinks, he probably might not even have read it or knows this. Like, he knows of the series, of course, but maybe hasn't read. Like, there's just so much, and it's so specific. What style, what setting, how much. It's just, fantasy is just one of the most biggest, or the biggest genre I've ever seen for diversity, for ideas. And you could be a dark fantasy guy. You could be a light fantasy or high fantasy or this or that subgenre. So it's very particular. And I don't know if there's any overlap with all the other subgenres out there. So
there's this. I have to look up what the name was. Was just when I was visiting friends a couple of years ago. One friend, and he had his role play evening on that day. So he had his other two friends over and slammed together a character, and I had no idea what was coming, and it was a dark fantasy role-playing system world, and from the artwork in the book, it seemed to have been based or inspired by Earthdawn, just a darker version of Earthdawn. And I have to look up what that is because the world was really interesting. So there's some good stuff out there, even in role playing.
Yeah, it's too diverse to talk about specific examples because everyone has their own taste. Plus, there's styles of writing. Plus, there's writing for specific genres for different age groups. So you're going to get a mix of so many styles and demographics and appreciation of just a subgenre, let alone the entire genre. But okay, this is going to be 32 minutes. We'll take some time. I doubt we'll get through it all today. We'll see how well this goes and how many mistakes he makes, because at least I'm pretty well versed on this topic, so we'll see how this runs. Anyway, let's get started.
Killing people is fun, isn't it? It feels great when you pull off a good death scene. People cry, you're a good writer because you made people feel something, which, is hard these days. So I've been studying 19 death scenes by brilliant authors across multiple genres, why they work, and what specific techniques we can learn from them. And I got in an expert.
Hi, I'm Sean Bean.
And I'll even show you a death scene that I wrote. They're gonna hate it. Oh no, it's terrible. Oh my god, what if I'm a failure? And because I don't want you mad at me, spoilers, okay? For all of these things, we're talking character deaths. You've been warned. This type of video takes a lot of time for me to read, study, and write. So thanks to the writing and world building program Campfire for sponsoring the video and helping make it possible. And you know what? You can help the channel and get 20% off. That's right, 20% off with my code down below. And my last video like this on writing character descriptions, gotta be honest, started out really terrible. But once people started commenting, liking, sharing, etc., it literally saved the video. I hate to be that guy, but it really does help. Part 1. The language you use matters. Now, you already know...
All right, so yes, this is true, but this is the more generic response to writing. You say your style of writing, how you communicate words, the way you grew up, your manners, how you learn to speak, how you learn to write. That's kind of... English. It's nothing to do with death, nothing to do with how you kill someone or the culture surrounding death and killing. So he is going way before the genre or the topic here. He is talking about writing in general, which is fine. Yeah. But unless he explains this as a very broad brush, meaning get your writing to a certain style and standard, then you can get into the bigger details. Like, okay, true.
Yeah, for an example from translation, because we got in Germany a new Lord of the Rings translation, and it is abhorrent.
Still,
the original one is still the best, I would say, and it's a full translation where all the names are also translated, all the English names and titles, and so when you make a mix of that, it's another topic. You can't do that the right way, but for Lord of the Rings, it makes sense to go full 100% translation. And in the original translation, for example, even the elves were translated not into the German word elf, but elb, which is a special form. But that aside, the important part is the hobbits all speak in a very, you could say, what's the word? Not just formal, but the very polite manner, like the way people talked or address each other when they're talking with other adults. So some always called Mr. Frodo Herr Frodo. So that's although they're relatively similar in age, or at least comes across like that. But he sees him as a superior, so he always calls him Herr Frodo, like Mr. Frodo. And in the new translation, he just calls him Chef, which is, in German, Chef is not just used for the master cook, it's also used for your boss. So it's like, as if he's just as if in the English version, he instead of saying Mr. Frodo, some would always say boss this, boss that. Boss, what are you hurting? Like it sounds ridiculous. Honestly ridiculous. Not Cavernacle ridiculous, but actually ridiculous.
So the equivalent of the word chief, I guess.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. Imagine some always calling, referring to Frodo as chief.
I actually had a teacher like that, but
that kind of just it sounds like a satire.
It sounds like some guy in a job. He's doing a job for Mr. Frodo. He's like, "Hey, boss, where do you want to go next? Mount Doom? Okay." It's like, no, that doesn't.
And then it takes a lot out of that. And this is where I would say, yeah, if you write the story with this completely different vibe,
yes,
that changes everything else that happens.
Which unfortunately has nothing to do with the topic at hand. So, yeah.
Well, it's not, at least not currently.
Probably.
Yeah.
Know that if the reader is invested in a character, it's gonna hurt when they die, no matter how.
Okay, so I don't know why he's changing topics, but yes, investing yourself in the character, that's true. Yes, it will affect how you care about their death.
Get readers
this is what I mean. If I have some who's referring to Frodo in the sloppy manner,
well, okay, but
I may not take his emotional connection that seriously.
He is writing words on this. I don't know why he's doing this. Is he trying to prove that grammar is important? I'm like, yes, spelling and grammar and punctuation and capitals and lowercase. Yes, this is all important, but has nothing to do with the topic.
In your character, isn't that helpful advice? That's kind of all of writing, isn't it?
Yes.
But what you focus on and your word choice when describing them dying will create different feelings for the reader.
No, you went from 0, meaning basic writing, and now he's like after the fact. After you're killing someone, in the process of killing them, it's how you describe their death. It's like, not really, no. Actually describing...
he made a massive jump.
Yeah, after describing how they die is not as important as why and how they're actually being killed.
You still have the emotional reactions of the other characters around.
There's a lot.
Maybe he's trying to get at that.
Yeah,
but that's not all there is to it, though.
Yeah, describing the bullet hole, how it exited the brain, is not really that important.
Yeah, and someone in the chat, I completely agree. I had the same thing in the book as well as in the movie when I first saw it. I never felt sad when Boromir died. I just felt this is an asshole. That was as a kid when I read it the first time. I was like, he's an asshole. Okay, he died. I'm not sad.
Yeah.
I didn't get his that he took heart in that moment again. That he got around to fighting for the hobbits in that moment. That I hadn't caught that nuance back then.
All right.
focusing on visceral bodily descriptors like the snap of bones breaking and specific bodily trauma creates fear and horror in the reader. Unsurprisingly, it's a hallmark of Stephen King's writing.
And then, as he entered the zone of broken glass, he felt her hand close around his left ankle and squeeze.
First off, do not begin your sentences with "and." Try not to use "then" too much either, but never start a sentence with "and" unless you're the Bible. When it's religious text, that's a different thing. Those are just the way they are. But Stephen King should know this. And I think in English class, I even had I think it was an essay, even by him or Neil Gaiman, about Stephen King, where this was mentioned as well. Never start a sentence with "and." That is just really bad writing.
Yeah, the Bible does it because events depicted in the Bible are much more of a progression of events.
First off that, and then it's very old language that went through translation. So
That too.
That's where you get that. So even though the languages we have it in now, we have it translated into now, do not follow the original grammar because the grammar is just that different. Like
I can tell you right now, the new version doesn't, and it's a lot better it's a lot better off for it.
All right.
Well, a lot got lost because there are grammatical structures in the original languages that simply do not exist, and thereby meaning gets lost if you do not elaborate on it, which was not done.
Well, I think he's.
True.
I don't know. I don't think he understands the topic. If this is his first rule or his first lesson. Maybe he'll have some conclusion that'll make sense, but I'm not impressed so far.
His stump excruciatingly. He screamed. One of his elbows came down on a hook of glass and it jabbed up into his arm. He crawled forward anyway, with it sticking out of him like a pushpin. He turned back again, and yes, her face had gone black, a dusky, rotted plum black from which her bleeding eyes bulged wildly. The pressure slackened. For a moment, he could breathe again. Then Annie collapsed on top of him, a mountain of slack flesh, and he couldn't breathe at all.
King's focus is on these
Okay, I must admit I haven't seen Stephen King. I haven't read much of Stephen King. I read Langoliers that was translated. So most of the stuff I have read from Stephen King was German translations. When I started reading English, I never read never read a King novel again. So this is the first time I actually see his English writing, and this is really bad style.
This is bad. Yeah. Okay. First off, there's comma splices. You have ellipses. You have he. There's certain things you do for action and to show the progression of events, and repetition is not the one way to do it.
And you're completely right. What I'm taking special notice with is this point of he turned back again, and yes, comma, description. This is, you can do that type of thing. There's probably a word for it, but it's like he's describing. He's trying to get a reaction of realization from you, that you have an anticipation, and it is, and it comes true. But you don't write like that as the author. You should rather do this in either if you write poetry, prose, or you write speech. Somebody tells you of that.
Yeah,
somebody tells you a story. This is like he is, as the author, telling me a story as if orally.
Yeah, that's the technique of using dialogue as narration, which is fine, but that would have to be consistent throughout the story. In this case, he's using just standard descriptions, and the things he's highlighting right here are very, I wouldn't say they're that great. There's verbs and there's some adjectives, but they're not that great. I'm not impressed. There's nothing inherently special about them. I'm glad there's only one adjective here or there. You don't put more than one adjective in your noun or in your verb. So I don't see anything
on the topic specifically, he's not very although the word is being used, what he's describing is not described in a very gross or excruciating manner, if you ask me. This is very lightweight stuff. If you want to write horror, and this falls in the physical part, it still makes more sense to write it in more of a stretched out fashion, so that you can, as the reader, you're dragged into the pain that is going on. It's painful to keep reading.
Yeah, some of this
that's
is
what you want to, and this is just flat statements. That's
the only one I like is he turned back again, and yes, her face had gone black, a dusky, rotted plum black. That is a good description because it gives me a very specific color and a texture, and then to see from which her bleeding eyes bulged wildly. That's kind of a weird image from this dusky, rotted plum black. So it
sounds like a first draft.
Well, yeah, that's the kind of stuff we tend to avoid. And when you have all these like two adjectives together, you put a comma in there. Dusky, comma, rotted plum black, comma, from which her bleeding eyes like it's basic stuff. Yeah. I'm not against using the comma splice or the Oxford comma, however you want to use it. But once you have multiple descripters, you got to watch yourself.
It's a normal thing in German grammar too.
I know, but
only the last one, when the you have a line of words, be it nouns, be it adjectives. Only the last one that you combine with an and. There you don't do a comma, but between all the others you put a comma for readability.
Yeah, but either way, again, this has nothing to do with the topic so far. He's just talking about grammar, which is fine, but this is not going to make you care about your character. You're way too late in the game. You don't kill off a guy and say, look at the descriptor of how he dies. Doesn't that make you care? It's like, no, this has nothing to do with the character. This is the event of him dying, or in the process of someone killing him, or stepping on glass, or whoop-de-doo.
Yeah. I just want to say from this tiny excerpt, I wouldn't want to read Stephen King, not because of gross stuff, but because this is just really bad style. And even Terry Pratchett in his Discworld novels has a few very tough scenes, and he knows how to write horror, how to describe the horror scenes with when you have old gods stuff. Like he has a bit of a part of the Discworld that references into Lovecraftian horror. And Pratchett is doing that really, really well.
Well,
Stephen King, I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's difficult. Sometimes he has moments of brilliance, and sometimes it's just a mishmash of everything. And this is an example of a mishmash. Nothing's being built up. The horror, like if you don't know how horror works, it's kind of like inflating a balloon. And every paragraph, or sometimes every page, has a little mystery that's a little, you don't reveal the mystery, you just sort of pull the veneer away, and you just slowly pull the veneer fully, not all the way, just slowly in each paragraph until you get to the one moment where the balloon just gets so big it's about to pop. It never pops though. And you keep it inflated as much as you can. And there's too many things happening in this paragraph, I think, for a person to look and feel a certain way. If there was one feeling, which was disgust, and then the next paragraph was then horror, or then pain, and then like you want to expound upon each feeling, as opposed to giving me 30 feelings all at once. It's too confusing. So anyway, I'm not going to credit that. I just want to.
I'm not doing things. I'm not doing well with anything that goes into body horror. That is bad injuries as well, but I don't get a reaction from this.
Yeah,
I'm trying to imagine it, and it's just nothing.
Yeah, we need
and that if I'm prone to this stuff and I don't get a reaction from this, then I have to say this is bad.
Yeah. All right, let's go.
clear in descriptions of injuries and pain that create this claustrophobic feeling with a real threat of harm that we can understand very physically.
Yeah, I don't know. What is he getting at? What is he?
Because she fell down onto him or something.
I don't.
There's no. This does not convey claustrophobia at all. Just because she collapsed on him in this dying fashion, like no.
Yeah, I don't get it.
It's not enough. This disgust maybe or wanting to run away, but claustrophobia is a very specific feeling.
Point that we're left with a sigh of relief when it's over, and we can contrast this with how Philip Pullman describes Lee Scoresby's death in his Dark Materials.
Another crack, and this time the bullet went deep somewhere inside, seeking out the center of his life. He thought, it won't find it there. Hester's my center. Lee found it hard to pull the trigger. Everything was hard. Then, she was pressing her little proud, broken self against his face, as close as she could get. And then they died.
The language here talks about pain and death in the abstract, rather than attaching it to visceral bodily descriptors like King, where Pullman uses metaphors and similes to abstract us from the pain of death, focusing instead on the love that he and his daemon Hester shared. King's only poetic?
I would rather say what happens there is it gives with the and then they died. That's just a surprise moment. Because the character didn't expect it, didn't believe in it, but then it happened anyway.
Well, this is the example of a third-person omniscient perspective that has insight into their psyche, saying, oh, bullets aren't going to stop me. I have this metaphysical belief in something, an X, and then, and my heart gave out, and then they died. You're like, okay. So it's changing the topic from the focus being someone getting shot or whatever, to them being, no, I just got shot, but I'm okay. This can't stop me. And then they die, literally. So imagine that in a movie, or imagine that in some sort of visual medium where you see a bullet enter someone's body and they're screaming or saying something along the lines of, you can't stop me, and then like 2 seconds later they collapse. You're like, oh, okay, they're dead. So poetry can work, but it needs a bit more flowery language for that to be effective.
Only closer to the painful and uncomfortable experience with words like slack flesh. The word choice in The Subtle Knife helps the reader feel sorrow and loss, not uncomfortable or horrified the way King wants us to feel. He could have described the intense agony of having a bullet inside you, but he doesn't. Consider where the words put the focus in the description of your death scene, and also how abstracted the reader is from the character's pain and suffering. But this is also why you've got to think really carefully about Part 2. How you introduce the death.
Okay, that was just completely worthless. I'm sorry. But if you're going to say, hey, describe the death in a metaphor, describe the death viscerally, describe the death in terms of not pain, but in some, it's like you're just abstracting from what you want to do in a story.
That wasn't an issue of language, it was an issue of focus.
He could have been describing how to bake a pie, and someone's writing the experience down. That's exactly the same message he's trying to give you, without giving you any insight of what makes this scene special, or why you do it, or how you do it. That was almost useless.
Yeah, and it's also a misunderstanding, as I said, of his idea of what language you use. It's not about what language you use. Yeah. It was the difference between focusing on the physical, on the outward from the dying character, and on the, as you pointed out, on the psyche, on what the character mentally goes through as it happens.
Right. So
that's not an issue of language. That's an issue of perspective.
This is what we do with writing in general. You find your own style, you find your own structure, and you just do it that way. And you do that way however you want, in whatever scenario you want. If you want to talk about the visceral nature of getting stabbed, do it in your style. Do not suddenly change your style. This is a fundamental problem with this video. You cannot say, look how King does it. Look how this guy does it. Look how that guy does it. It's like, that's great. That's good to know. But he's trying to teach us how to write. It's like, yes, this is something that you figure out after years of reading and years of writing, and then you write down a murder, or you write down a short story about a guy killing another guy, and you don't suddenly shift your perspective. You don't suddenly go into poetry unless that is the point.
Yeah, and if you have a long saga, like Wheel of Time, for example, there are several character deaths, there are several horrific or strenuous scenes in there, and it depends on the context, the situation, and the general atmosphere of the place people are in. When something happens in the cursed city of Shadar Logoth, or the nebulous ruins in the desert, that is a completely. Those are much darker. There's a much darker atmosphere in Eva, where way more surreal things happen, and that is where visceral descriptions as well as psychological horror descriptions make way more sense, even when you have the same characters around.
All right, here is JS. Thank you for the donation. Not going to lie, Pullman's description sounds like someone who doesn't know how to write action, so he deliberately wraps it in poetic language to mask it. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you could write your death scene in this metaphor, or what it means to the author. A lot of people who write scenarios want to be colorful and poetic anyway, and sometimes that's the point. But that's, again, about style and structure for what you're trying to do. If you want to write a death scene where everything's this strange metaphor of what this person's life meant before they die, then that's what you would do, and that's totally cool. But that would be like one chapter, or that would be like one scene, and you would jump back to your standard whatever prose, which is punchy or ephemeral, or whatever your style is at that point. So this is seriously about being consistent, and if you suddenly change your tone and your style, you're going to lose people. So that's the main problem. I don't care how you describe your death scene. That's not that relevant. It's why you're doing it that way and how consistent you are previously. Here is Brap of the Wild. Brap? What's a Brap? Real talk, in your writing, if you want to do a sex scene, don't bother. Chances are you're never going to top the greatest sex scene, nay, the greatest sex scene ever written, the sex scene between Rouge the Bat and Espio in Sonic High School.
Oh, God.
I don't want to know. I think I'm okay.
No, you don't.
All right. I'm good. Thank you for that heads up, though. Other things to avoid in my life. Sonic porn. Okay, great.
Sonic, anything, man. Any Sonic fan, anything.
Yeah, I think so.
So British Terabithia when I was like 10, a great age to read a book like that. And it's about two kids who bond over an imaginary magical land together. Who would have guessed I'd love it? And the ending is really tight, like a rope that will never snap. Both it and John Green's Looking for Alaska are books that deal with the unfair suddenness of death, with denial and unresolved grief. And they do it in similar ways. So let's look at how they introduce the death to do that.
He watched the car go out of sight, the joy giggling inside of him so hard that he wouldn't have been surprised if his feet had just taken off from the ground.
What is it with you English or American authors and putting ellipses everywhere?
I hope he's paraphrasing, because that doesn't make sense. I don't like all these dots everywhere.
Do not write with ellipses. It's a sign you are a hack beginner in your teens. Yeah,
there are times to break ideas and do an aside. It's called a dash, and then you connect it back to the original sentence with a second dash. So you have, he watched the car go out of sight, dash, and he was very scared, dash, and then blah, 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 blah. So that would be more effective, because if you really wanted to say something out of the idea, you would just connect it that way, and then go back to the sentence. So.
Yeah, when you write speech of characters, an ellipsis can give a connotation of how the character is talking on top of how you describe the character.
Right. It's like a pause.
Talking. Yeah, or someone getting lost in thought or not finding a word or anything like that. But in the main body of the text that is not character speech, do not use ellipses. Please.
Here is JS says, thanks for the donation. No, not looking for Alaska, for heaven's sake. Okay, well, we will never talk of that ever again. Fine. Here's White Knight Leo for the $5. Thank you, sir. Picard and Discovery at Tanagra. Wow. Shaka when the ratings fell. I watched Bridge over and never saw it again. I don't remember it if it was good. Okay. Good enough for me. But those first two sentences were brilliant. Wow. Picard and Discovery at Tanagra.
Shaka, when the ratings fell.
They both stabbed each other. That's what happened at Tanagra. All right.
The way they sometimes did in dreams and floated him right over the roof. He was all the way into the kitchen before he realized that something was wrong. His dad's pickup hadn't been outside the door, but he hadn't taken it in until he came into the room and found them all sitting there. His parents and the little girls at the kitchen table, and Ellie and Brenda on the couch. Not eating. There was no food on the table. Not watching TV. It wasn't even turned on. He stood unmoving for a second while they stared at him. Suddenly, his mother let out a great, shuddering sob. "Oh my God! Oh my God!" She said it over and over, her head down on her arms. His father moved to put his arm around her awkwardly, but he didn't take his eyes off Jess. "I told you, he just gone off somewhere," Maybelle said quietly and stubbornly, as though she had repeated it often and no one had believed her. Brenda's pouting voice broke in. "Your girlfriend's dead, and Mama thought you was dead too."
She just kills a kid. Like that. My crush when I was 10, just gone. Dead. I'm fine. Great book. Firstly, there's no explanation or gradually leaning into the death. It's just, your girlfriend's dead. Very suddenly.
There's no leading in? You just read 3 paragraphs of a tragedy that no one knows what's happening exactly. When there's a tragedy, what do you think is going to happen? Death is usually number one. Just a heads up, okay? If everyone's not doing the thing they're supposed to do in a house and everyone's just like, they don't know what to do. Everyone's quiet and then someone starts crying. Yeah, I think we saw this coming. I don't know. At first I thought he was talking about something unrelated to the topic again. But then after the second paragraph, like, okay, yeah, someone died.
The sentence, almost unkindly suddenly. They phrase it in this cold and very factual way. Secondly, they both offer the reader an alternative explanation for why everyone is looking so worried to lure the reader into a false...
I wouldn't call it just factual or, well, when you say factual, the type of text I imagine I have in my head is very short sentences that give very clear descriptions. These are very long, elaborate sentences that meander into each other. That's not the same thing.
Right.
And writing sentences like that, it does get you lost a little bit. I'd say it fits the situation where the character is a bit in this shock or dream state. That's okay, but that is not. What did he say? Just factual? It's not a factual style. I wouldn't say so.
Well, I'm trying to explain the style, but it's again down to the third person omniscient narrator, and the narrator is trying to give you this detail of the scenario where the main character, or at least the person they're trying to talk to, isn't sure what's going on. And they're describing the tone of the room and what people are doing. And you're like, okay, something's creepy. Something's going on here. something unsure, something unclear. And then, boom, we find out a paragraph later. So it could have been a dream sequence. It could have been something he was like, why is everything weird? Because he's talking about the truck being outside and not inside. I'm like, why is a truck, why would it ever want to be inside? Is he describing something else? Something's happening I don't quite grasp. And then, oh yeah, someone's really sad. Okay, we got it.
And make sure your sentences are clearly understood unless ambiguity is your intention.
That's the other point. This could have been a really great scene where the tension could have kept building up and building up. And instead it just pops from the third paragraph, which is fine. That's the point. You want to get to the point as fast as possible. But this could have gone on for another 2 pages of just the creepiness and the what the hell's going on, and no one's saying anything and everyone's just sort of sad. It's like, what happened? And no one's talking. What's the problem? And then they look at you and they hug you and it's just this constant, more emotional elements, and just like, why is everything so tense? And if you still haven't figured it out, then you've never read a book before, or you're just not getting it. You've never been in this scenario before. So, this could have gone on for another 2 pages. Anyway.
Sense of security before revealing the truth. This gives us momentary relief, hope, which then makes the reveal all the more shocking and sharper. Thirdly, they both put it at a point in the narrative structure where the reader has kind of been promised that their character still has stuff to do, and at a point that we don't usually expect this kind of death.
They also both purposely place the death off screen to work against that assumption that we'll be able to be there to have a proper goodbye, to deprive us of that catharsis. Especially because in fiction we have this underlying logic that if a main character dies, then we'll be there to see it.
No.
I don't know. That may just be you. Because when the main character dies and you don't see it, that is the way I would go from experience is that's a mystery to figure out.
It depends on how many main characters there are.
How did it happen?
Yeah.
Who did it? It's often a case of who did it.
Right. If there is one, then yes, you should focus on that. If a new one is introduced immediately after, and then it's like the detective to figure out how they died, and that's the new plot, then fine. But if there's more than one main character, and all of a sudden the focus has been removed from one of the main characters, then we zoom in on the other main character, and that's fine. You can do that. That's totally cool. You can't just start killing your main character, and then the detective pops in the second chapter. I'm going to investigate the murderer of this boy, and then he dies, and then the son of the detective, who's also a detective or private investigator, starts investigating the death of his dad, and then he dies. It's just like, okay, this is getting stupid.
What?
Like you can't just keep eliminating main characters like that. And believe me, I've read stories like that, so it does get pretty stupid.
Oh yeah. Blizzard did this with all the Warcraft characters.
Oh yeah, chapter 1.
Everybody's a raid boss now.
Really?
Well, yeah, it started it got really bad with Burning Crusade already with the first expansion, and you just kill everyone because the people were just completely uncreative. They couldn't really write continue the story properly, get new characters in or anything.
So Final Fantasy 14.
Here is
whatever.
White Knight Leo. I stole those from Twitter. Sorry. No, they're perfectly fine. I like them.
That's fine.
Yep. Okay, let's go.
But we aren't. But death does not wait. It also sets the story up to explore.
Sure it does. You could write about a death for paragraphs and chapters and come back to it, and you could do whatever you want in your story. That's totally fine. It would be weird.
Have you ever met Death from Discworld? Most of what he does is waiting. Death waits all the time. Death I think this is a Native American way to look at it. Death is a hunter. And a hunter needs to be patient. And Death always hunts for you and is just in arm's reach. If you stretch out your left arm, just at the tip of it, just out of reach, is death, sitting there and waiting for the right moment. He's always there.
I've read stories and poetry which the whole story is someone dying.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes on for 20 pages or, 4 pages for a poem. So you can stretch out any scene you like. So I don't know. I don't like this. This guy has a very, I wouldn't say juvenile understanding of what he's talking about, but he's just coming to conclusions. And it's like, dude, no.
The death is not waiting thing, I've never heard that before.
Yeah.
It's always, when you talk about death, it's always the opposite.
Yeah, it's usually someone who never, he's mortally wounded, but he's still not dead. You're like, are you going to die? You've been bleeding for 2 minutes now.
Especially Marvel.
Yeah, or the supervillain. Can you please stop with your supervillain speech and just die?
Yeah. Here is Louis seems gay. Okay, Louis, thanks for the donation.
Damn, dude, really?
This guy strikes me as a just right ripoff. No, I wouldn't go that far. He is obviously read these books and he's trying to summarize them into some pattern that he hasn't quite understood. He's just doing his best, which is not enough, unfortunately.
Yeah. I from what I've watched from Hello Future Me is he's hit or miss. He has some good videos and then some stuff. Just Right is just not really grounded, I'd say.
He's all over
Best
the place.
way.
Yeah. An uninformed dipshit who doesn't understand the words he uses and constantly contradicts himself. He knows he likes an aspect of writing, but can't communicate as to why. Yeah, he hasn't focused on the principles of what it means to write death or write about killing or murdering or whatever. And he just did not bother to look at genre. He did not bother to look at style. He just started, hey, this author did this. And you're like, okay, what does that mean? And then he goes to another author, and this author did that. And you're like, that's great. What's your point? They'd have different styles. No shit, they're different authors. What's your point? And then he jumps into point 2, and you're like, this is not going to go well. So, death does not wait is not neither here nor there.
Feelings of denial and dread leading up to the reveal as the clues slowly stack up for us, and the guilt of not being there for them after. These may be feelings that you want the reader to have, and these can help you do that. Off-screen deaths can also happen for other reasons too, suspense, or it's inappropriate for your style or genre or age group, or you want their final moment to be something else perhaps. Maybe a father is on a trip with his son in the Arctic and they're running out of food, and to ensure his son survives, he goes out into the cold to die. The important moment here is the goodbye and not the death. The son not seeing the death is even important. In contrast, we can look at how the death of the 10th Doctor from Doctor Who is introduced to us.
Which I have not, and will not get over, because we all damn well know it peaked with him. If you disagree with me, feel free to tell me why you're wrong in the comments.
10's death is introduced very gradually. We can see it coming for a long time, and it's 20 minutes from knowing he will die to dead. It's not a gruesome slog of him bleeding out on the ground either.
The writer didn't want to create the feelings of horror and fear like Stephen King, or shock and loss like Bridge to Terabithia or Looking for Alaska.
He wanted us to feel the sorrow that comes from the inevitability of knowing your death is coming and not being able to stop it, culminating.
This was also enhanced by David Tennant acting so well because he was attached to the role. He wanted it from when he was a kid, when he first saw Doctor Who as a kid, to and then he really did not want to let go. He did want to continue playing, but he knew he had to stop at some point, and it better be at a peak. So that all comes into this, and this is why I'd say it is one of the stronger, if not the strongest, Doctor transitions that we've seen. And then the last one we got was this decrepit hack of an actor that didn't even care about the role, which is unthinkable for Britons. Like, how can you cast someone for this iconic role that does not even care about this franchise, about this character that is
Wait, who?
that is part of of Doctor Who, that is so much ingrained
No,
part.
who's the actor that doesn't care?
Mm-hmm. And
No, who's the actor?
What?
No, which actor is it? I don't remember.
Oh, I do the woman. I forgot her name.
Oh yeah. Her.
And
Jodie Whittaker.
yeah, and with her, people couldn't even wait until she's gone.
I think they've already changed the lore to reflect that the Doctor has an infinite number of lives. It's just this.
Oh god, it's just horrible. This is cultural vandalism.
Well, no,
this whole thing was cultural vandalism together with an actor who didn't even care about the fucking role.
Okay, well, Jodie Whittaker being put as the Doctor's one thing. The whole thing that he has more lives, that was in like a special with Matt Smith, where it's like the Time Lords give him an entirely new regeneration cycle.
Yeah, that was okay.
That's a whole separate thing. And technically, the Matt Smith Doctor is technically the first one in the new cycle.
Yeah,
because because if you look at it, in the original cycle he was the last one, including the War Doctor.
Yeah, but I just hope this whole Jodie Whittaker stuff gets completely retconned, as other stuff has been retconned, as the Jodie Whittaker stuff has retconned other stuff. That it just gets completely thrown out, and we get somewhat consistency with Doctor Who is not a real thing. But
and it's even worse the fact that unfortunately they do give some kind of explanation, like with like the whole situation with Missy being the Master. Spoilers. And it's like apparently the stupid reason is that the Time Lord can choose the gender. It's like bullshit.
That's bullshit.
Bullshit.
The Time Lord cannot change the sex because Doctor Who, after transformations, regularly made quips, comments, jokes about that.
Did the female Doctor do that? I don't think so.
I don't know. I haven't even watched a single episode with her because the writing during what was the old guy before? I really liked him.
Peter Capaldi.
Yeah, Capaldi.
And
I really liked him.
And he was also a Doctor Who fan before doing it.
Yeah, and I really, really liked him. And he had a minor role in a previous Doctor Who episode, the one on Pompeii.
Yes.
And Capaldi, I really like his acting. I think he makes a good Doctor Who. But the writing got so bad I couldn't watch anymore.
It did well in his case. It did help that he was also a fan.
Yeah, that saved it for a while, but I couldn't stand it anymore, which is really sad because that's a waste of a great actor.
All right, let's get back.
Yeah.
In this final moment,
I don't want to go.
This is a feeling a lot of stories about terminally ill characters try to create in the reader, and in both cases, that time before the death is really important to fostering that feeling.
But sometimes character deaths can be dragged out to help the reader come to terms with their death, accept it, eventually move on with this bittersweet ending.
Gladiator ends with the death of Maximus, and you can see it coming for a long time with him seeing his family in the afterlife in these flashes. Where Bridge to Terabithia's suddenness feels horrible because there was never any chance to say goodbye or come to terms with it, by the time Maximus actually dies, there's this catharsis for the viewer that he's finally at rest, especially because those last moments are spent killing the antagonist. His whole story is tied up for us. There's also no sudden tonal shift in this moment either, like there are in the stories of Looking for Alaska and Bridge to Terabithia, because the writers wanted the death to feel like a natural passage for the character and this story. We are being told to let him go. It's not jarring in any way, it's just the next step. You as the author can use a drawn-out death scene to make it easier or harder to accept the death by guiding the reader with how the characters are reacting to it. In stories about how to face death for both the reader and character, that time before death is precious.
But As I studied these, I realized that basically all of them use this literary technique to heighten the emotions of their death scenes. They use
Part 3, Juxtaposition.
placing two contrasting things right next to one another to elevate their differences.
Bridge to Terabithia makes a point of describing just how happy Jess is. Things are going great, right before he learns of Leslie's death.
Where did happen?
And similarly, Looking for Alaska has Miles ecstatic, thinking about how he's just begun to kiss Alaska, this girl of his dreams. All to make that sudden tonal drop more drastic and the pain more sudden, because there's this whiplash against that recently uplifting emotion.
I want to show you how it's used in this really sweet short story called Two Robots at the End of the World, which is about two robots at the end of the world, called Motherboard and Toaster.
A burning tide was washing over the horizon. It glittered with memory, its many arms propping itself up on the mountain tops. 4%. Toaster had seen many images of humans watching the sunrise and sunset. One of them had always rested their head on the shoulder of the other. He had no head, and Motherboard had no shoulder, but he wheeled himself up onto the rock at her level and tipped his optics screen onto her bonnet. It was growing colder. "Remember to keep your solar plates open, Toaster," she said.
So, Motherboard does not have a shoulder, but she has a bonnet? Just asking.
Audio chip fuzzing out on the last few words. Clinging to the sunrise, Motherboard used what little power she had left to sear the fire and bronze display onto her optics. It was the last thing she would ever see. A sunrise that would stay with her forever. Crystallized, not bent or refracted, every strand captured perfectly. Her optics dipped. "Motherboard?" said Toaster. But he was alone.
And that was written by me, actually. I didn't want to shape your expectations of it by telling you first.
Juxtaposing Motherboard's death with a beautiful sunrise just serves to emphasize the grim reality of her death in a way that simply describing how horrible and dark and fearful and painful it is now would not. Juxtaposition like this also complicates your prose in a death.
Okay, your last sentence. Motherboard, ? Said Toaster. You should have asked Toaster. Should have written the verb asked, not said.
Actually, you don't even need to have who said what if there's only two characters.
True.
Just say Motherboard ? And then
True.
And then he was alone, and that's
Yeah. This is one of these exceptional situations where you can, because you also should not start a sentence with but, just as you shouldn't start one with and. This is the exception where you can, because just stopping, just making the point, just ask Toaster, point, period is the English one, sorry. That gives it a pause. Then comes the realization, but he was alone. You could just say, he was alone in the next line. Or, as you said, just leave the said Toaster or ask Toaster away and just line break, he was alone.
Yeah. Here is
you can leave all the clutter away.
Here's a good donation. I like this one. Here's from JS. What about Rutger Hauer's excellent death monologue in Blade Runner? I wonder if it will get mentioned. That's actually really good because it's not drawn out, even though it does take about 30 seconds or whatever. He is winning a fight with what's his face, with the detective, and he picks him up and he saves him because he just broke his arm or his hand or shattered it, whatever. And then he starts having his monologue about dying because he knows he's going to die. This is, of course, being a replicant, so he could feel this. So he may as well help the guy he's trying to stop because his life is almost gone. Because he had so much value for his own life, he also values the life of the person who's trying to stop him. And it's that action and then what he's trying to tell that I have lived such an amazing life that you couldn't even possibly understand. And I want you to understand that. That's what makes that special. And I don't think it's drawn out at all. Obviously, it's an artificial life form, so they have different processes and strengths and weaknesses and awareness of what it means to die. So that is a very good comment as well. That was all ad-libbed, or the Rutger Hauer fixed the dialogue to his own fashion. So
it reminds me the quasi-death scene, transition scene of David Tennant's Doctor at the end, where he says, "I don't want to go." That was also an ad-lib. That was his personal emotional breakout. That was not in the script.
Yeah, it was basically the fact that he was one of the better doctors, and they damn well knew it, right?
Yeah, and he really enjoyed this to every last bit, and those were his real emotions. That wasn't just acted.
Yeah.
That's what he really felt about the role. And in the chat, Ego Dreamer, yeah, I completely agree with you. That's completely right. He could just end it with motherboard ?
Right.
And just leave it there.
About David Tennant, he actually did a really good performance in Good Omens a few years back. And, I mean, David Tennant's a great actor in general, so I'm just glad he got more gigs to show off his skills. So, more a British storytelling, I guess. All right.
I didn't know they made a movie from Good Omens, but they're probably going at all the Gaiman books now.
Pretty much. Just, Gaiman, please save our network. Please make something that will sell. It's like, yep, okay, here's some thing I did 30 years ago. Let me dust it off for you.
Okay, then couple of years we'll get the Neil Gaiman miniseries with all his short stories.
Oh, yeah. Well, surely, yeah.
Oh, please no, that one is just a sex scene, because he wanted to write a realistic sex scene.
Yeah.
Where the pair is talking about mundane things while they're having sex, which he thinks is normal, is the actual how normal people have normal sex. And he describes that in the annotations.
Yeah.
Because he was annoyed at how other people write sex scenes where it's always just silence. Like, dude, are you talking about your groceries when you have sex with your wife? Hey, what the hell?
It's a reflex.
I'm trying to remember the what the hell was that Deathbird Stories story by Harlan Ellison, where he just wrote about a bunch of gargoyles awaking from the building tops of New York and just killing everyone in the streets. And that's the whole story. It's just the gargoyles came down, saw a bunch of Catholics and slaughtered them. The gargoyles came down, saw a bunch of workers and slaughtered them. They just come down and kill people. That's the whole story. There's no message. There's no theme. It's
like a part of a story.
I don't know why.
Like, I wrote this one chapter here, and I didn't know what story to write around it. So say after chapter. I need to sell a book.
Yeah, I think it's.
I need money.
I think it's called Bleeding Stones in the short story anthology, and he might have been trying to talk about environments or saving the planet or something, and I don't know, but there's no mention of it.
What?
Yeah, that's the great thing about Harlan. He doesn't want to throw his politics at you, but he'll just talk about it in his own way.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the chat, Alexander Welch says he can't super chat, but he said something, just a little note. He said they turned the redhead in Good Omens into a black girl as well.
That's also what the BBC does. They race swap all kinds of characters. And Gaiman's, of course, go for it. I love that shit. And he's like, okay, fine.
Yeah, but the redheads, it's always the redheads.
I know. Why not use the genealogy of your landmass that has this wonderful phenotype that no one else has? I don't know. Doesn't make sense.
Because ginger is an anagram.
Oh, anyway, let's go.
Scene. dark times can hold a lot of meaning for characters and the reader, like it does for Toaster here. It's intentionally bittersweet, and it's something Motherboard always wanted to see. But Gladiator, on the other hand...
I did not catch that. I'm sorry. That juxtaposition just went right over my head.
Yeah.
Unless it's blatantly clear, dude, showing me a contrast is not going to work. You could have been describing the sun and the moon, and I wouldn't have caught it as a juxtaposition.
Yeah.
This is a word I learned back in grade school, and it was unique in how we understood it, but he is getting so obscure. He could have used the word influence or conflict or any term and said, this is a really good technique when you're talking about death and you show the conflict of why they're dying. And you're like, okay, sure. And it could have been that. And you're like, yeah, why is that good? I don't know. Show conflict in all your writing. Anyway, JS, thanks for the donation. I also wonder if Boromir's dialogue with Aragorn in his final moments will get a mention. Sean Bean absolutely tears that scene. He only showed it. He didn't talk about it yet. Yeah. Gave us a few seconds.
We'll see.
Yeah. Okay.
Actually use Juxtaposition to help us come to terms with Maximus's death and let him go. The final scenes flick and contrast between the bloody, dry arena and the beautiful, tranquil fields of the afterlife. The beauty of the next life only makes the bloody reality of this one worse.
No. I wouldn't go that far at all. He was having this dream. And it was foreshadowed that this is what he wants and where he's going. That he's thinking of his wife and child.
Yeah, that's a really weird interpretation. Like the image of the afterlife makes this world worse.
Yeah, no.
If the afterlife is portrayed as tranquil and nice and a metaphor for release and peace, with that interpretation, dude, are you depressed? Are you suicidal?
Yeah, why go through all this conflict of trying to kill
that does sound.
Why?
That's an interpretation that suicidal people make.
Yeah, why go through vengeance? Why go through all this effort if he's happier where he thinks he's going? That's a weird take.
Yeah. Please see a therapist, man. I'm not, and I don't mean this in an insulting manner.
No, of course. The interpretation's very, very awkward, I think.
Yeah.
Scene goes on, you want him to move on to this beautiful place. Until he does, and it feels right.
So the question is, what small thing could you juxtapose the death against in your prose to enhance the emotions or atmosphere that you want your reader to feel?
A giant penis. That's exactly what you want to juxtapose. You want death and this giant erect throb. Like, what is this guy talking about? Come on. Juxtapose a thing to give you a contrast. Yeah, contrast the most obscure, disgusting thing.
Dude, if you wrote your character in a way that the reader really gives a crap about the character, you don't need to juxtapose anything.
Exactly. Give us a character we care about, and then when he dies, however he dies, everyone's sad.
Yeah. Normal people have feelings without you having to juxtapose anything.
It's as if he's forgetting why we care about a character, and he wants this elaborate description of foreshadowing and nuance and how the bullet enters the brain. And you're like, yeah, that's interesting.
You can do these things, but it's not important. Important is that, do I care about the character?
Yes.
If I don't care about the character, okay, you have written some nice stuff there, okay, yeah, but I don't care about this character.
Yeah.
Can we get back to the story?
You know what? It's sad that even something as out of nowhere as Power Rangers can do a death scene, right?
Yeah.
And yet most things today cannot, for the life of them.
Well, the great thing about Power Rangers is because it's designed for kids, you have to know how to story tell things for kids in the most basic, simplest way. So if you don't,
and they did, and even with people that are longtime fans can still get in it.
Yeah, if you can't grasp the the likability or the attraction of a bunch of superheroes or whatever you want to call the Sentai genre as heroes.
Superheroes, basically.
Yeah, they're basically superheroes, Japanese versions of superheroes. And you can't grasp that heroic spirit and courage and fighting and striving to protect people, then you're missing the whole concept, even if it's childish and goofy. So it's funny. That's why I dislike it in Hideo Kojima, because the villains are bouncing around like Power Rangers. I'm like, this is not working for me.
No.
Nanomachine, son.
But it's like I'm saying, like the one death scene I'm referring to, which was still pretty early on in the franchise's life. That one most definitely knew exactly how to portray the circumstances behind it, as well as everyone's reaction to it. That one knew exactly the elements it had to put together to make it work, and they did.
You see, I would like him to look at genre and then say, why does this death work in this genre? And then take another show or another story in the same genre with a death that doesn't work. That would have probably been a better way of learning about what he's trying to teach. Because right now he's just giving us random stories, and you're like, yeah, this is a movie with foreshadowing where he believes in an afterlife, and you're like, yeah, okay. Doesn't have to juxtapose a thing.
Much.
We all like Maximus. We all do. He's cool.
Yeah, keep it specifically to the tragic moment of the death, the tragic nature of the death scene itself. Don't try to overcomplicate it with the juxtaposition.
And
just keep it to what it's doing.
That's a great scene, because not only do we see it multiple times through the film, there's this musical. What's the term? The orator, the singer, that sort of song starts playing whenever he starts envisioning his wife and kid. It's very similar to the effect of Batman versus Superman, where we have Batman and the death of his family, and that music starts playing, and you're like, oh, I know that sound. They connect it with the visual, and boom. And it works dramatically, because your brain and your ears and your eyes go, yes, this is working. I understand what's happening. It's very simple. Mm-hmm. So, of course, the actual character of Batman is a mixed bag in that film, but we understand, at least visually and orally,
it's not necessary. It's not always a juxtaposition, as he's putting it. Like another children's movie. And children's movie Kung Fu Panda, when the old master, the turtle guy,
Shifu.
What his name? No, that was the.
No.
That's a little guy.
No, Shifu. Yeah, that's the current master. Oogway.
Oogway. Yes, thank you. When Oogway dies, accepts to die, finally can go. That's shown in a very tranquil, mystical, magical way. But that does not, and it's still sad. It's still touching, because even though we haven't seen this character a lot, but he's so friendly and supportive and a bit funny that he grows on you very fast, especially as a kid.
Also, we don't see him much, and yet he's one of the best characters in the movie.
Yeah. And then when he passes on, that's not a juxtaposition. I mean, his death is also a positive for him. He has done what he needed to do in life.
It still falls in line with what is established about him. It doesn't break the moment when he actually does die compared to what he did for the rest of the movie.
Yeah, but Hello Future Me could interpret that scene still in his juxtaposition definition.
All right. Here is JS again. Example of a death that doesn't work. Remember when in season 6 of Game of Thrones, they killed Blackfish off screen because they had absolutely no idea how to write. They did a lot of dumb things in Game of Thrones regarding death, just because I'm assuming they thought that the author killed off so many characters, therefore they could also learn a thing or two of how to do that. And
you can't kill random characters at random times when it doesn't match with the story, with the book, because then you are forced to write a different story, and then you cannot use the book as reference anymore.
Right, and I remember
whatever's left of it.
The one that pissed me off the most, and I just saw a clip, so I had no context of what was going on. It was Sir Barristan Selmy, and Sir Barristan, that I remember, was the greatest swordsman. The old man, but the greatest swordsman. In the book, he doesn't use a sword; he uses a cane. But in the show, they gave him a sword, so he's decked out. He's got his sword, he's got his armor, he's all ready to fight. And he gets killed by just like a bunch of mooks, and you're just like, wait a second. The greatest swordsman of all of Westeros gets taken down by a bunch of dudes in some town. I don't even know what the setting was. Like that doesn't make sense.
Yeah. When you're a true master, it's not about strength anymore. Yes, you do not have that advantage anymore, but you fight differently when you get old.
And plus the style he was fighting, like this is like a broad, like this is like a heavy sword. So you got to be really tough to wield this thing. And you could argue, well, the other guys were faster than he was, or you're like, yeah, maybe, but he was at his age. Like this was like years ago. This is the first season. He said, no, was this second season? Yeah, I think it was second or third season. He looks to all the knights. He's like, I could kill you all right now, like I was carving a cake. Like he was so serious. Like,
and then swap.
And then they threw him away.
And I would believe it. If you've ever done real martial arts with not a Mac Dojo crap, and you've got some old people who did this for most of their life, let's say 40 years or more, and they'll fight completely different from the young people because they got slower, but they don't just know so many tricks, they know fighting so well that they know what you're going to do just from the tiniest movements or from the position you're in, and so they need to expend very little energy to fight you and to win over you. And this is what Sir Barrister would do as well, most likely. So you don't need a big sword. It makes sense that he would use a cane, because that is, first off, it's lighter. Second off, all he needs to do is deflect a sword into a direction where he isn't being hit, and then just poke the thing into someone's face. Or bring someone out of balance, which is mostly what you do with a stick, and especially when the other's in armor.
Look at Daredevil.
Yeah, just hit the right spot in someone's leg, and then he falls over. And if he's in armor, good luck with that on the ground. Thing is, look up after the stream. Look up. Kendo Master. I don't know the other tags anymore. You can find clips of a documentary. Sadly, it's really bad quality. It's really, really old film of an old Kendo Master talking about how his fighting style changed as he aged, and he keeps explaining that even. When he turned 80, he noticed his legs getting slower, so he had to rely on his upper body more. And then when he turned 90, his arms got slower, so he needed to use his head more, something like that. Like he turned 90, and he said he was still learning stuff. And there's fight scenes of him, sparring scenes, and he's barely moving, and he's just whacking the young people. And with young, I mean 30 and 40-year-olds, because by comparison, they're half his age.
Yes.
And it's just this. this is a true thing. Old people that are absolute masters at their craft. It doesn't matter how young and you are, how much energy you have. These people will beat you up. And you won't even know how they did it because they barely moved a muscle.
I remember that story of
it
that.
It looks like magic. It isn't magic, but I can certainly understand why myths about these mystical warriors came to be.
There's this, I can't remember which documentary it was. There was a 70-year-old woman, and she was, I think, jiu-jitsu master, like 6th or 7th degree, like at some ridiculous level. And you can't tell because she's this older woman, and she's just walking down the street. And they showed what she can do, and I was like, holy crap, she can just tear someone's arm off just with just a few simple motions. You're like, okay. And that's when, this is before jiu-jitsu became a well-known thing in MMA. So no one really knew about it. But once you learn, you're like, holy crap, this thing's very effective. And, well, that's what they teach. So, anyway, yeah, scary stuff. If you were a guy with a sword, that stuff doesn't go away. Maybe speed and strength, but skills are still there. Anyway.
Death scenes handling a lot of complicated emotions. You really want the reader to feel something. And when you want that, it can be really easy to fall into
Part 4. Melodrama!
This is funny. This is not. This funny. This not. Funny, not.
That's why.
When you really want the reader to feel something, there's this very real temptation to just ramp up the intensity and displays of emotion, falling to their knees, crying to the heavens, fainting in shock, going, I have been guilty of this, and chances are so have you, and it's especially tempting when killing a character. We want readers to feel things. But melodrama isn't that great these days. Melodrama strips a scene of subtext,
which is when there's information not explicitly said, but it plays into the scene. Depth, in other words. Look what's being felt and explored, but isn't being said aloud in the scene. It's also just not convincing for characters to be over-dramatic in these ways, which can at worst make it funny in your most emotional moments, but it's also just not that immersive, because we're being told how to feel rather than just letting ourselves feel the moment as it is.
The reality is, humans will often have a lot going on inside their head, even if it doesn't come out in these big displays, physically or vocally.
This simple
I wouldn't say that the Boromir scene in the movie was not melodramatic. I think it was. It was just less so than in the book, but it still was.
It's the same with the guy getting stabbed, 12 different ways and he's still breathing. So, unless you're Andre the Giant and you have a lot of flesh to go through, it's like, no, this guy would have died a long time ago or passed out.
Yeah. Boromir takes a long time to die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Handshake between John Coffey and Paul Edgecombe as he puts this innocent man to death is a hell of a lot more meaningful to me than...
Well, yeah, but this is a joke. Everyone knows this is a joke. I don't know why this was in the film. It's stupid. It's childish.
Lucas thought it was good, and that's the problem.
Yeah.
Just There's two good videos on this for In New Hope. That is how In New Hope was saved in the editing room, and a reply video to that of how it was not saved in the editing room or something. There's a reply video to that elaborates further on the topic with almost the same title. That also clears up some of the misconceptions of the first video. They're both very, very worthwhile to watch. And it explains basically that Lucas has ideas, but he, as we know by now, needs people to reel him in. And he would have, if that hadn't been done with A New Hope, it would have been a worse mess than the prequels.
Yes.
All right, let's go.
Even though the handshake is very underplayed, restraint and what we don't say are also fantastic indications of emotions and character.
So, Are you being melodramatic with your death scene? Well, I think there are 4 main red flags that are easy to look out for.
1. Characters are expressing emotions disproportionate to their death or to how they would usually express themselves, especially physically. It's out of character, but the story treats it as totally...
Okay, if you don't know what melodrama is, you don't need 4 stupid rules, okay? Melodrama is something more than should be there. It's too much of a thing. It's too much of emotion, time, plot, whatever. There's too much going on. That's melodrama. It's when you talk about Star Wars or soap operas, everything is drawn out. Everything is bigger. That's melodrama. There's no one way to do melodrama. It's just too much of a thing where there shouldn't be there, or it doesn't have enough value behind the thing that is big. And the author or director or producer is like, hey, put more explosions in there. That'll give it more value. It's like, okay. Not really.
Authentic. 2. Characters are expressing everything that they're feeling vocally. Stay with me. Oh, it's getting...
Or they could be doing it without their sound. They could be doing it with their body and moving around like crazy and acting like a bunch of crazy people when they get shot, as we saw in the previous scene.
Dark cliches often come to mind about this. 3. Characters are describing just how freaking intense an emotion is, rather than what it means for them, or
Yeah,
describe...
but that's dumb. I'm so scared I wet myself, and now I'm going to knock myself out and hang myself upside down. And like okay, go crazy.
Describing how they're reading. And 4. Excessive use of metaphors or extended metaphors to describe the feelings.
And cheers to Shailene Bishop, Faye Onyx, and Chris Winkle, who pointed out the last couple of those that I hadn't thought of.
And for a great example, let's return to the instant classic 50 Shades of Grey.
Your friends are dumb. I just wanted to say that.
I think just the mere mention of 50 Shades invalidates this video already.
It's like, thanks for all those people who helped me out in coming up with these rules that no one will ever remember. I was like, yeah.
The pain is indescribable. Physical, mental, metaphysical.
Oh my God.
It is everywhere, seeping into the marrow of my bones. Grief. This is grief, and I brought it on myself. Deep down, a nasty, unbidden thought comes from my inner goddess. Her lips contorted with snarl. The physical pain from the bite of a bell.
Okay, we have ellipses. We have long dashes.
Yeah.
It's fitting that he had a woman reading this here in complete. I wouldn't call this ecstasy. This is just
every time
ridiculously overdone.
Every time he does this on the screen, it's bad. The grammar is horrendous. We're just like, oh.
Yeah. I'm oh God, how can people gobble this up? But this description, and this is the thought process of the character.
Yes. So this thing
this
right
is
here.
This is so superficial. This is
This long dash. That's not how you use a long dash. It should be a short dash, and it should be a second short dash somewhere else here. This is no longer prose. This is pretty much just poetry at this point.
And the way this is the descriptions, the choice of words. This is how a 14-year-old writes.
Yes.
At best, and it's these kinds of authors seem to think that to describe the indescribable, you just say it's indescribable and then leave out stuff. No, that's not how Lovecraft did it. This is what Lovecraft did well. He, in part, sometimes he didn't name the thing, he described around it, and this is not what this is here. This is just pretentious. This is pretentious pseudo-intellectual crap.
Nothing compared to this devastation.
existential pain or relief or loss after someone's death is
it's just exaggerated nonsense.
But people don't tend to think of it in these abstract ways, but in how we can't get out of bed, how we feel nothing when we're doing something we would usually love, how we can't focus on damn well anything. I'm not saying using metaphors to describe emotions is melodramatic on its own, it's not. But having them dominate how a character expresses their emotions, especially metaphors that are esoteric and heady and philosophical, can make a death feel like it's not really happening in or affecting reality.
We can immediately
yes, as Wisp, you said, it's like the way a mentality of a child or an adolescent might think, because they think in extremes or generals, and you're like, yeah, this is stupid, this is childish.
Yeah, and just on this little bit of the pain is indescribable, and then come these pathetic descriptions.
Yeah.
When you say something like that, you haven't yet ever been in pain, because humans can go through immense levels of pain that can kill you, and you can survive that, just the pain alone. And if you've gone through that, you can describe these things. You can describe pain to the level of where it is about to kill you, because it's too much for your nervous system. It's too much adrenaline in your system. But you can describe these things. So if you write the pain is indescribable, that tells me that the author doesn't even know what pain is, except from maybe stumping your pinky toe on a corner or something. I guess, an inconvenience.
Well,
someone stole my lollipop.
When we're talking about
fuck off.
Sexual pleasure from pain or vice versa, it's kind of like you got to know that actual mentality, and that just sounds stupid. That like there are stories which I've read.
This 50 Shades stuff is also written as if the author has never had an orgasm.
Well, that's probably part of it too, but there are stories out there about S&M, and sometimes they're written, sometimes they're poetic, sometimes they're visual.
They can be written well.
They can, exactly. It doesn't matter what the topic is or what you're describing; it's how you're doing it, and whether what you're saying makes any goddamn sense, and doesn't sound like a child is like, "Oh, I'm in so much suffering. I've lost my lollipop." Yeah. You're like, what?
that example, and that example, it really reads like the most stereotypical lines you could imagine, like as if this was a satire.
Yeah.
Bad writing. When writing is, there's bad writing, and then there's writing so bad it is indistinguishable from satire.
This is why.
And this is what this just was.
Yeah, that's why we make fun of a lot of fan fiction and all that crap. Which
50 Shades is fan fiction.
That is where it came from, and how it became better, I don't know, or how it became popular as a result of being a movie. That the writing had to be changed, I assume, because you can't just directly translate a short story or whatever novella to a movie.
Mm-hmm.
So an actual playwright would go, okay, let me fix this up for screen, and hopefully the actors did it some justice, unless you don't want to be caught dead being an actor in that movie, but it could be good.
It still sucks.
I have no idea, and I never will.
All right, found it.
Anyway. Hopefully you never will.
Yeah.
Contrast this to Miles' reaction to Alaska's death in Looking for Alaska.
Gasping, vomiting over and over again, wanting to melt into the brown, crunchy grass, a dull, endless pain in my gut that wouldn't go away even when I knelt on the stingingly frozen tile of the bathroom, dry heaving. Very little is abstract here, and even when it is, it's all grounded in very relatable actions and decisions. This is where you need to listen to beta readers. If they tell you it's melodramatic, it's probably because it's coming across that way. But it also may mean that you haven't built up the important story beats the way that you think, and so readers might just not be convinced of the intensity of these emotions yet. And that's because as authors, it is very easy for us to feel what we think people should be feeling when we're reading our own writing.
But I also found that the most heart-wrenching deaths for me went even further than this, because they, part 5, leave the character with something unfinished. A goal they haven't reached, a conversation they need to have, a place they need to see, an arc they haven't finished, something important they need to do, and it especially hurts if they're really close to it. This does 2 things. One,
all right, so this is probably the most relevant argument he's making. He's talking about a plot. And your character wants something. Could be a side character, could be a villain. It doesn't really matter what the character is. And they don't get it. And they're striving really hard. The story of the hero usually is of the main character who, regardless of adversity and all the pain and suffering he can go through, his virtue or their virtue is endurance. They can take it. They can get cut. They can get lashed. They can lose arms and limbs, and they keep going on. And obviously you can't have them have mortal wounds or suffer bullets to the head or whatever, but that's the whole point of the character overcoming their struggle for whatever they're trying to achieve. So when we have actual death of a side character, as I say in my book, a side character is just another flavor of a main character. So you take the protagonist or the antagonist, you make a side character, a secondary or supporting cast member, and they're just another flavor of those big 2 characters. You can kill them off. And that's what makes it sad, because they are just another main character in your story that doesn't get what they want, that could not do what your protagonist or your antagonist could. That's it. It has nothing to do with them being killed off, because their plot could easily change, and then now they want something else, or there's a tragedy they befall that now their plot changes again, or whatever the case may be. Something changes within them. And that's about character growth, not necessarily character death, because character death can be changed as well. You can have a character who gets what they want, and then they die, because they've already achieved everything they wanted in the story, not necessarily in life or anything like that, and that's fine too. So it feels good that, oh yeah, this character is done. They did the thing they were supposed to do. They saved the little girl. He can go away now. We don't need him. Or his death is like within 1 sentence, and we never hear or see him ever again. So there are techniques for this, and we're not talking about death. We're talking about the narrative. And he's finally referring to the plot. And instead of talking about the plot, as we see on the screen, he's talking about catharsis, which I don't know.
Well, it's character plot, if you will.
I don't know why. I don't know what that has anything to do with plot, but okay.
How's that work for Shadow in American Gods in the book?
Catharsis?
Because spoilers, at one point he dies.
Yeah, I know.
But the afterlife is weird, so he can choose to go back.
Yeah, Balder is kind of he's not sure what the hell's going on actually. He's like, what is this place? Who am I? Like, what am I? And no one quite figures it out.
I love the whole scene with Thoth is there to weigh his heart against the feather.
Yeah.
The very heavy feather. To decide whether he goes to the nice afterlife or the eternal hell. And turns out his heart is just as heavy as the feather. As heavy with sin. So he is one of the few people who, I think they have to look up what even happens then, because that never happened. And that allows him to choose for himself what to do, which opens up a third path for him, which is going back and finishing whatever he still needs to do.
All right, here's
and he does get an epilogue, if you will.
I'm trying to remember the books. Yeah, it's Egyptian death. Yeah.
Yeah.
They changed a lot in the show, which I haven't watched, so I don't pay attention to it anymore.
I don't want to watch it. I probably fucked it all up.
Yeah. Anyway, here's JS again.
Just like Lucifer.
This is why I had such a visceral reaction to looking at for Alaska earlier. It's typical emo core cringe. You can practically hear My Chemical Romance reading that book. Ugh. Yeah. Anyway, let's figure out how depriving catharsis. What is the fifth? What is it? Let me just rewind this. Leave the character with something unfinished is about depriving catharsis to who?
Well, the character.
Yeah, but
this makes no sense.
The catharsis is for the audience, not the character. I don't know what he's talking about.
Yes.
Anyway.
Unfinished. A goal they haven't reached, a conversation they need to have, a place they need to see, an arc they haven't finished, something important they need to do, and it especially hurts if they're really close to it. This does two things.
One, it's hard to come to terms with their death when we don't get the catharsis we feel we deserve, when their subplots and arcs aren't neatly tied up yet. And two,
that's backwards. When we see people die in Game of Thrones, we're like, holy shit, there goes the entire Stark family. It's not because we wanted to see the catharsis of their plot. We just wanted to see what the hell they were going to do in getting what they deserve. Not that we're emotionally tied. This is weird. He's trying to tell the audience, hey, you had all these hopes and dreams of your characters, and they're gone now. And you're like, yes, we wouldn't know what we would have felt, and now we never will. It's like, oh, well. And now everything's dead. Now everyone's gone. And you're like, oh, that sucks.
Yeah, guess rebellion's over now.
Yeah, it's like I'm about to get married.
Was weird.
And then boom, I'm not going to get married. Oh, crap. There goes my bride. That's sad. That's tragic. It's not.
That specifically does not apply to the Power Rangers death scene I mentioned earlier, because the end goal applies to everyone, not just the one character.
When we talk about catharsis, we're actually referring to tragedy. So, and Aristotle will say the whole point of a piece of work is tragedy, or is catharsis through tragedy. So if you read or watch Puccini's operettas, most of his stuff makes you cry because there's all this death. There's all these desires of two lovers trying to be together, and they die, or one of them dies and the other one kills themselves. That's catharsis, because you feel sorry for these people. Then it feels good to get all those emotions out because this play has created it for you. It's not the fact that they're not getting what they want and you're deprived of it. It's the fact they didn't get what they want and you feel sorry for them, and that causes you to be cathartic. That's the point. I don't know what he's getting at. Depriving catharsis to whom? I don't get it. Anyway, let's go.
It makes it more affected for the same reasons. We kind of expect everything to be tied up before a character can die. Jon Snow's death in George R. Martin's A Dance with Dragons hit when it came out because Jon still hadn't learned the truth of his parents, beaten the others, or fully earned the loyalty of the Night's Watch as leader. John Green captures this feeling quite nicely in Alaska's unexplored relationship with Miles, as he thinks, I have just begun to kiss her. In Bridge to Terabithia, they still have to save the imaginary kingdom together when she dies. The 10th Doctor's whole thing was that he felt like he could do so much more if he didn't die.
I consistently found that the most painful deaths for me left me with these unresolved feelings of something left unfinished that deprived me of the catharsis I thought the character...
Okay, he doesn't know what catharsis is. I'm sorry, dude. You just don't know what you're talking about. That's not what catharsis... You cannot have deprived or denied catharsis unless you're watching a Puccini operetta and no one dies. And you're like, oh... So, happily ever after, I guess?
That was nice.
Yeah, it's like, oh, everyone's happy. There's all this buildup and, oh, we're fine. All right. We don't know what's going to happen next, and nothing happens. Everyone's fine. That's not cathartic. Yeah. That's just, nothing happens.
Cathartic for the reader, in this case, is then when the hero of the story picks up on that unfinished business.
That is,
and solves it for the dead. That can bring catharsis to the reader, but not to any character.
I don't know the mental state of the characters unless they tell me and show me, but even then, that's very specific to their personality, which the whole point of a character is to grow in a story and change, so we want to see what happens, and if it doesn't happen, then we feel sad. We're like, oh, I like that guy. Why did you kill that guy? And then you feel catharsis because you feel sad, and the sadness goes away. What is happening?
No. He means the not the normal progression of feeling, but this instant uplifting relief. That's what he means with catharsis.
That's not catharsis. It's not instant.
I have heard it. I have heard it defined like that a lot.
Okay, well, if you see a sad story or a tragic opera or anything involving tragedy, it is a slow slog. It is this. It's like having hot peppers. You eat a hot pepper, it's like a slow burn, the back of your throat, and it doesn't go away for a good 10 minutes. That is what crying during a film. It builds up. It doesn't. You don't just go, "Oh, Superman died." Oh, you care about Superman. He's this hero character. He's struggling. He's seemingly invincible, and he just keeps getting knocked back. And he's trying to save humanity, and he keeps losing.
Yeah,
and then he dies.
Yeah. And I agree that catharsis is more correctly understood as that you go through, you live out the actual emotion that's pent up inside, and that you can do through a tragic moment in a story.
This is why
it doesn't need a happy relief.
This is why the emotion is not specific to the story; it's specific to the individual in their lives. So when you read a book or play a game, and I say this before, people who have played Mass Effect, they had a rough patch, they lost a parent or whatever, and they play the game, there's some dramatic moment in there, someone else dies in the story, and they feel catharsis because they're going through something similar, and they feel alleviated because, oh, I can express my feelings through this other drama, which is fake.
So Morden's death,
Ashley's death, pick a death. There's all kinds of...
Well, specifically Morden's Paragon death.
Yes, because he sacrifices himself, and it's very tragic because he lost him, but he's doing it because what he believes in is good, and everyone's like, I can't stop him, and he plays his little song, and boom, he's gone.
Yeah, in that case, it does complete his arc.
Right.
Yeah.
In a way.
And PK Eot, or however you pronounce that, in the chat says, modern definition of catharsis seems to be releasing emotion getting relief by having some kind of resolution. That is what I have come across a lot. However, I do not, in the classic sense, and this is the more important, including for psychology, is that you do not need the resolution as a catalyst to get to catharsis. Because it is, especially when we go into psychotherapy, and you have internal conflict and suppressed emotion because your life, or for example, especially an abusive life, where you got abused a lot emotionally, you naturally had to lock that all up. You have all these pent up emotions. That is where it makes sense to at some point get those out, at least once, in a safe environment, let's say, where you don't lose face in front of the whole world, like Kevin Smith crying to the camera all the time, like a buffoon. It's almost attention whoring in his case. That's not what I'm talking about. But you get watch if you have a certain kind of trauma, for example, and you watch a movie that tackles a similar story, tackles similar emotion situations with that, you can free up some of that because you finally have something to process it with, something to reflect against it, and that allows to finally get some of that through, and that is a psychological cleansing, if you will, and that is what the term catharsis means. It is a cleansing of the psyche or the soul through living or witnessing these often tragic events. It can be positive emotions too, but especially that's where it comes from, the Greek tragedy, the Greek theater. We watch this kind of theater to have actors play out a story that is very tragic, very emotionally taxing, and this allows us, through empathy, to work through our own emotions in these regards that we have pent up through our lives. That is why we watch this stuff.
Yeah,
some watch it out of sadistic reasons. That's another story. But most people do it because of this.
Yeah,
because of the cleansing factor.
Any tragedy. The whole point of tragedy is no one gets what they want. They all die.
Mm-hmm.
Shakespeare does this. I mean, this is very common. So, if that's the case, then everyone just like doesn't get any catharsis, which is not the case because we all feel sad. And then, we got all these negative emotions we were bottling up for other reasons that maybe are subconscious or what have you. And it's through the avenue of media we can alleviate those feelings, go to bed, wake up the next morning, and feel much better. So the characters in these stories don't get what they want.
Yeah, you could say it is watching a tragic theater play, or today it would be a movie or a video game with a tragic story, is a form of therapy. You don't need to be completely broken to benefit from that. It's why we have this genre of literature.
All right. Well, he's obviously not aware of genre. I wish he took a genre approach to this because he's missing 90% of literature and storytelling to try to explain some weird thing he found. And I'm like, I don't know, buddy.
Deserved and undeserved. We talked before about sudden versus expected deaths, and leaving something unfinished can really help capture that sense of the suddenness of death. That death doesn't wait for us to tie up all of our plot lines.
On the other hand, you could complicate the reader's feelings about a character's death by having them willing to die, but some things are still unfinished. The reader can feel that catharsis, but there's also that element of unfairness. Snape kind of fits into this. He dies in the Deathly Hallows knowing he is protecting Harry, and that Harry knows that he was protecting him. But he never gets to see Voldemort's fall, a final revenge for Lily that he always wanted. But at the same time, we kind of love stories where characters are finished before they die, like in Gladiator. We like fiction with that kind of security, that nice ending in a way. It's part of that escapism, even if it's heartbreaking in a different way. It's sad because they're dying, yeah, but it's also a happy ending in a twisted way because we don't have this unresolved tension with them. Especially if they chose to die heroically, sacrificing their life, it's bittersweet. It gives us hope that people can change and death won't get in the way.
I mean, is anything more...
Characters like Boromir die with hope. He's given hope in his dying moments that the mission will be accomplished. Even without him. That's what allows him to die with a smile. One of many.
And it brings especially the satisfaction of that hope to the forefront when the mission is actually accomplished.
Right. So Boromir, Snape, these are all side characters. This is what you do with side characters. You kill them off. So, I mean,
Snape is kind of...
You rather can. Killing your main character in the middle of the story is kind of Not
a good idea, no.
I mean, in the case of Snape, it was near the end. It was pretty much right at the end of the series.
Right. Yeah. But
whereas like it was at a point where the stakes were higher than they'd ever been before, and it's like things were definitely going to happen whether you liked it or not.
Yeah, it's just happened in Mass Effect. You kill off a side character to complete the mission. Mission continues. Da 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 da. You got to live with it. Great. They actually didn't really play with that too much, unfortunately, throughout the series. They mention it, but they could have worked with that angle of losing comrades a lot better. And it's only really mentioned in Mass Effect 2 here and there because the line of no one gets left behind, which is basically a military slogan anyway, which is pretty standard. So, which is fine, but it wasn't played up enough, I thought. Anyway, here's the Mechanist for $1.12. Oh no, you're changing your donation limit. Oh my goodness. Finally here, I can't believe that I missed a Red and Fallout video. Here's my hot take. Fallout 3 is better than New Vegas. That's right, I said it. Why are you booing me? Why are you booing me? You know I'm
because
right.
You deserve it. Because you deserve it. I'm sorry. No, it's like even as a joke. It's like New Vegas definitely had a lot of things that put it leaps and bounds over 3, despite being so close in release date. Obsidian definitely knew what they were doing. But moving on.
Yes. No argument for me.
A red flag that a character is about to cock it, than them going, I'm so glad that my character arc is done. Hey, I can't wait to retire to that farm up north like we always said we would. Anyways, I'm gonna go fight the bad guys now. I'll see you in a couple of days. He's already dead.
But things don't have to be unexpected to be good, alright, Game of Thrones? But it's a different experience for the reader, and you gotta know what experience you want the reader to have. Do you want them feeling unresolved, accepting it, sad but understanding, or somewhere in between?
And if you want to make it even more heartbreaking, and I mean at this point we're neck deep in depression, you can add an element of
Part 6. Injustice or unfairness.
They didn't deserve it, it's just pointless suffering, it was inevitable.
What these also forgot is that, especially with the Boromir scene, is a classic example of the side character dying in a relevant fashion. Shows the gravity of the story. People can die. People can die in this story.
Yeah, this is the same.
that raises the stakes for the other character.
This is the same argument as the previous point. I don't see a difference.
It sounds similar. Let's see what he has to say on it.
They were just in the place at the wrong time. And it was at this point in writing the script that I realized that the death that impacted me the most was probably Donna Noble from Doctor Who.
Technically, she doesn't die, but she does lose all of her memories and the person she has grown to become. It's functionally death of the character we know. What made it so heartbreaking was that Donna began as someone who saw herself as worthless and unremarkable, but had grown over the story in her self-esteem to see herself as capable, someone of value. More than anyone, she deserved to keep her experiences of being with the Doctor, but she got this horrible ending.
And again, you know this is when Doctor Who peaked, this is not up for debate.
Injustice or unfairness creates a different kind of empathy in the reader, but it can also create a resentment or hatred against the character who causes their death in a way that, say, 2 equally skilled opponents dueling it out might not, and that might be valuable to you as a writer. Could be the spark of a vengeance quest or a descent into madness.
And that's because the truth is that death scenes aren't really just about the character that dies, they're about
Part 7. How it affects the people around them.
In both the case of something being left unfinished or injustice and unfairness, these have consequences for the remaining characters. Now, one of the pieces that you will usually come across when looking at death scenes is that deaths should have a second purpose in the narrative. And I mostly agree with this.
Unfinished plot threads are a great way to do that because the remaining characters have to deal with the holes left behind by this character. When Ned Stark died in the Game of Thrones, he had promised to tell Jon his true parentage, and Jon is left grappling with the idea that he might never know. Ned's goal was to protect his family from the Lannisters, and so that job falls to Robb Stark, who in response calls himself the King in the North. It gives narrative weight and meaningful consequences to their death rather than just being a thing that happened. It can even sometimes give catharsis in the long term as characters fill those holes left behind or get justice where the character couldn't. In Pixar's Up, Ellie Fredrickson always wanted to see Paradise Falls, but died before she ever could. So Carl does this by the end of the film, and there's a catharsis to that. Then he finally fulfilled her dream. So you can use unfinished plot threads to control the reader's experience and give the death more purpose and meaning. And that unfairness...
By finishing the plot thread? Okay. That's nothing more than just having a secondary main character continue the plot. Or a plot.
Yeah.
That's not... The
intro movie of Up was the better movie anyway. I'm serious. When I watched that, I paused the movie and just went out, and the actual movie I watched the next day, because I just saw a complete story, a complete movie. It affected me. It's okay. I'm done. I don't need to watch more now. That was the better thing. And then the children's movie came. And this is, by the way, this is how you write well for children movies, for cinema, because you have something mature for the parents too. You have these two layers. You have the nice story for the kids, and you have the tough, deep, mature story for the parents to enjoy with.
Or injustice can also come from how it affects the characters around them.
Some people also say that you need to know a character really well to care about them dying, but, hot take, I don't think that's really true. A character who we don't know well dying can still mean a lot if we know what that person represents to another character.
In what
So I can care for a character if I know what someone else thinks of that character? No. Let's say
no, that never works.
Let's say we have a king who we never see in the story, and then we have a main character who loves the king and worships the king and thinks the king's the bee's knees. The next scene, the king dies. We don't care about the king. We never cared about the king. Why would we?
Yes, you do have to establish the other character in order to feel something for the main one.
Yeah, this is really dumb. Like, this is really... Like, what is he on here? I don't even get this.
Remains of Maya Sankovi by G. D'Angia, an AI is tasked to be the mother of human children on a new planet. We don't know that much about their first child, Daisy, but we do know what successfully bringing this first child into the world means to the AI.
We see Daisy's dandelion head pop up and down on the waves. She's unconscious, a small speck in a sea of rust and scarlet. We feel the heat of our components and see the warnings emerge in our field of vision. We fight against the waves, against the errors. They swallow Daisy, pull her little body under. We dive, bump into...
Did you just put parentheses at the ellipses at the beginning of a sentence?
Oh dear.
Okay.
What is wrong with all you people?
I hope this is all just them hearing the audiobook and then typing it out very poorly. I hope.
That's most likely it.
Yeah, but oh god, even then, if you're leaving out a part here, you put the angular brackets around the ellipses. That means you left out something.
Yeah.
But this, what the fuck is wrong with you? You're not authors. You're hacks.
Yeah, it's like this. What it looks like, it's just it looks like their like mind just blue screens for like a second and a half before they actually write the sentence.
A sharp stone knee before our hands grab Daisy's shoulder. We lay her down, stretch her neck, give CPR, and pump air into her lungs. 3 rounds, 3 terrible new memories. Then Daisy convulses, spews out the water she swallowed. Only a little bit of dying today. We cry out, we hug her, whisper her name against her hair, tell her we love her so, so much. Stupid child, we say, but we do not mean it. Daisy shakes and we cry without tears.
Her firstborn, her purpose, everything she hopes to be. And it's unfair. It hurts when she dies later in the story. The point is, a great death scene is made by what surrounds it as well, what we can call the scaffolding of the scene. But we need to bring this back to something a lot of less experienced writers grapple with, because a lot of us just assume that death is the end goal, but the truth is, Part 8, there are fates better than death. There are so many things worse than death that can happen to your characters. I can't just default to it because I think that's the only way to move a story
forward. This has nothing to do with the topic. I'm very sorry. He's just saying, hey, there's other things not like death. You're like, that's true. There aren't. Or there are.
Yeah, and there are things worse than death, yes. That's why some people yearn it.
There's also things tastier than strawberry ice cream. There's also things that smellier than certain kinds of cheeses. There are also things that are different shades of green aside from green. What is your point, sir?
Just
my thing is like, yes, there are worse things than death. One of them's called communism. I don't know. That came to me. I'm a fucking dumbass for coming up with that. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine, but there are also some other things that are worse than death, but...
No, yeah.
Let's just go.
Story for another time.
Because I read it to feel loss.
When I say fate's better than death, I mean better for your story. Death is a tool, but it's not necessarily the most meaningful, most impactful, not even most painful end you can give a character.
Donna losing her memories is proof enough. It's more meaningful and more painful than simply dying because she loses all of that character growth through no fault of her own.
Then how is it considered death if he just forgets everything? It's tragic because we know she was another
character reset. Yeah, but I think that's the way he just explained it. Is he solely means worse for the reader. He doesn't care about what happens to the character, what the characters go through. He just cares about what effect does it have on the reader. That this is a fate that the reader takes as more painful than had Donna died.
Here is the Mechanist again for $1.11. I only change my donation so that my total can have repeating numbers. Also, what do you think of a death that is instant but avoidable? Like someone could walk away from a fight, but because of hubris, they fight only to die instantly in the fight. It depends on the nature of the death, of course. Like, I remember, I bring up a lot because in Fate, everyone dies because they're all just ghosts of themselves. And in Hubris, Gilgamesh acknowledges Shiro as strong. And we all know Gilgamesh can just eliminate anyone. But because he's so hoity-toity, he thinks, you're not worthy of my time. So when someone actually is worthy of his time or who can kill him, he doesn't realize that till it's too late. So he's kind of like a sore loser in that regard. He's too high on his petard to realize his folly.
Again, the Final Fantasy version definitely does get those kinds of aspects right, despite the comedic edge.
Yeah, there's also times when, like the death of Julia in Cowboy Bebop, it's like it was a stray bullet or some random guy who was running up the stairs while they were on the rooftop, and you're like, oh, that guy came out of nowhere. And it's like, oh, that could have been avoided, true. But so could that entire fight scene. What's his name? Spike could have just ran away with the bullets and the gun in his car with Julia. So, there's all these other things that could have happened. But you kind of realize, oh yeah, this is only going to end in death, and how they executed the death is what matters. And the death of Julia was very, very dramatic, if not melodramatic, with the slow motion and the doves. Why would doves suddenly start flying after there was a shootout just, seconds ago? Don't know.
Because they missed their cue.
They missed their time to fly after the secondary character pops in. Oh, she's dead. So there's lots of reasons why you kill off a character in a certain way. It's all about how. Because Julia is just the mysterious woman no one knows. And when she dies, it's not about her, it's about Spike and his motivation.
only can figure out the most meaningful end to your character's story, but there are some tools that I use to help figure these out.
Personally, I am a big fan of literary symmetry.
For example, let's contrast Ned Stark's death in the Game of Thrones with Iroh's survival in The Last Airbender. Ned Stark's death is not literary symmetry, but it was perhaps the most meaningful way to end his story. It wove into the underlying Machiavellian philosophy of the series that traditionally heroic traits are no guarantees of success, which is why Varys explains to Ned, "It was not the wine that killed the king, it was your mercy." His mercy, his virtue in the end gets him killed. And he's the perfect character to establish that any...
Wait, which king?
Robert.
King Robert? So whose mercy killed the king? Stark?
I don't know. Oh, wait, it was not the wine that killed the king. I'm lost right now.
Who are we talking
Didn't
about?
Robert die at a hunting accident?
Are we talking about Joffrey?
Yeah, but Ned was dead by then.
Yeah. Who the hell are we talking about?
I'm confused.
I just don't give a shit about Game of Thrones, so I don't know nothing.
Yeah.
One in this story can die. In contrast, Iroh was once a warmongering nationalist who laid siege to Ba Sing Se for the Fire Nation. Now, he could have died saving Zuko, and that would have been meaningful in its own way.
No, he did his job because he was part of that military. He didn't do it because he liked it.
But the writer's kind of literary symmetry by having his story culminate in him saving Ba Sing Se from the Fire Nation instead, going from warmonger to peacekeeper. There's a literary symmetry here that gives his arc a sense of completeness, that it's come full circle.
And literary symmetry is comically common with villain deaths.
I mean, Harry survived Voldemort in the first book because of his mother's loving, willing sacrifice for him, and then in the 7th book, he's suddenly shocked that everyone is protected from Voldemort because Harry's loving, willing sacrifice for his friends.
You can draw a lot of tension from things that aren't the threat of death, so if you're looking for another more meaningful end to a character, look at their fears, their weaknesses, an end that would contrast with their arc across the story. And this is especially relevant for characters that you and the reader know will not die. You know the sort I'm talking about.
Nobody thinks the Doctor will ever permanently die. Companions, sure, they're a dime a dozen these days, but for him, it's just not on the card.
Nope, we kinda did, while we were informed that he only has a limited set of regenerations, which is what gave the whole thing stakes.
Yeah, and the thing is, he almost did die, but the Time Lords gave him a bailout.
Yep.
I'm still a little...
Points of the show.
I'm still a little confused on this literary symmetry.
I'm pretty sure there's already a term for that.
Yeah, I haven't heard of it before, but I think I know what he's trying to say.
Don't ask me complex things right now.
Yeah.
I'm tired.
For me, have always been when they threaten him with fates worse than death, losing his memories, his personality, losing the people around him, losing his morality. These all take account of his...
How is that any different?
And also, he didn't lose any of that. Also, he didn't lose any of that.
How?
At the end of the day?
Yeah, I don't understand. If you're no longer alive as the person you are now, you're dead. That person has ceased to be.
Yeah,
but
he does lose all his memories.
His personality, he does. It changes slightly.
5 minutes. Yes,
Sorry.
for all of 10 minutes.
his deepest strengths and weaknesses and turn them on their head. Whether you want a character to meet a painful or good ending, think about literary symmetry and fates that interact with their weaknesses, strengths, their arc, and fears. Redemption arcs sometimes...
I'm going to need another example. I'm not too sure what literary symmetry is. That sounds very generic to me.
Oh no, Star Wars.
I can imagine starting a chapter 1, where a guy does a routine in the morning, and then it happens again in chapter 7, only this time he's angry or something, and he's, I don't know, he trips while jogging or something like that. It's like, oh, it's the same thing except he hurt himself. Like, oh, I don't get it. I'm sorry. I just don't see the connection here.
Oh, look at the dust on Vader's helmet.
Oh my god.
That is
Lord.
That's important. That's what made the Star Wars universe feel so lived in as well. I guess that's something that is missing in part from the prequels.
It had a bunch of
everything's too clean.
About a bunch of
At least Rogue One got that right with him. As unnecessary as he was in that movie.
A bunch of 70s designs for robots, and they just threw them into the desert. And you're like, okay, why not?
Yeah.
I remember when I was a kid growing up, and my dad at his job they had robots. They had little robots from Star Wars basically running around the factories and the office space delivering shit. They just
Oh, really?
Yeah, they had a little painted line on the floor that they would follow, and they just went off.
The little mouse bots?
Yeah, essentially. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So this was a thing in the 70s and then later in the 80s that they just made more of them, but then we had computers just with email in the 90s, so it didn't really matter anymore. We didn't need those machines anymore. There's no need for them. So
And then between that and all the media and all the mainstream media showing robots taking over the world every 5 minutes.
Yeah, well, that's another thing.
Which is dumb that people would come to that conclusion so damn easily. But then again, most people are stupid. So
come up here with the now good guy sacrificing his life. And personally, I don't like that. I don't think it's really redemption to just die. Oh wow, man, look at all those bad things I did, I'm cock now. When it's much more meaningful to face up to the wrongs of your past.
But also, don't go too hard on yourself with any of this. Don't feel like you have to obey all of these esoteric writing rules. If you feel like your character's story naturally ends in death, or you just want to write their story that way, do it. It's your story. Don't listen to anyone else, and you'll still make people cry.
Everything I said, it means nothing. Okay, great.
Have fun with it.
That's all he's saying.
I knew one of you was gonna say it.
I made all these rules. By the way, I'm bullshitting you entirely. Just do whatever the fuck you want. Like, what?
Dude.
I mean, we already knew that.
It's all subjective. I made these rules. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Blah, blah, blah. It's like, that's not very helpful.
Are you sure you're an author?
Yeah, when I write a book with rules in them to follow on how to write, I'm not joking around. I thought about this for a long time. I read a lot of books. Okay. This is very odd.
Someone still has my Neuromancer book I just remembered.
Oh. Okay, we have a few minutes left. We're almost done.
I only take sponsors that I really do feel you guys might genuinely find helpful.
Oh no.
And Campfire,
we're done. Yay!
I'm pretty sure we're done, yeah.
Anything else coming?
Right at the very
making the
end.
reader uncomfortable, while
Right
more
at the very
abstract
end when
language
they say
allows us
stuff.
to focus on other feelings like
Oh, wait,
sorrow
there
and love rather than very real pain. Secondly, suddenly introducing death or placing it off screen helps the reader explore the unfair abruptness of death and feelings of unresolved grief. Alternative explanations can lure the reader into a false sense of security and make that reveal more impactful. Thirdly, longer death scenes can foster an exploration of powerlessness.
He's just summarizing what we already talked about, so it's
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not that helpful, really, or great, or explanatory.
Yeah, guys, honestly,
I don't. What's the purpose of this
Okay,
video?
now we're done.
You guys, when you write a death scene, which I'm sure most people in writing have done, I've done it a few times. I've done murder scenes, I've done killing scenes, I've done detective fiction scenes. You should already know what you're trying to get out of that scene. You don't need rules for the scene.
Yeah.
What you should have by that point is a style that is your own, and so long as you're consistent with that, you're fine. The problem you might have, which this guy barely talked about, was, do I give a shit about your character, whoever's getting killed? And if I don't, then, maybe you should go back to the drawing board with making me care for the guy before you kill him off. Unless there's a functional reason for his death, like a plot point, or they're a trope, like a sacrificial lamb, to prove something to the narrative that the stakes are now raised. That's good too. But all this talk about this character, this author did that, and this is melodrama from 50 Shades, and it's like, no, you're missing the point entirely. Make us care for your characters, then do what you want with them. That's all you got to do.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I don't know if we have any stream memes, but we'll find out.
I found the video of the Kendo Master. It's just a minute long, and his explanation is on mastery as you get older and older. Is you can apply that to writing as well. You will still, as long as your brain works, you will still keep refining your technique if you take the craft seriously.
All right.
And there are lots of authors, big authors, who haven't done that. They just stopped developing at some point.
So here is Gingaman and Wisp, I guess. That one actor from Doctor Who. Who? Exactly.
I didn't realize what I was saying. What? I didn't put it together. What? How did that not occur to me?
Yeah.
Wow.
That happened?
Yeah, that was the beginning. Hello, future me. Try juxtaposing your death scene with something to make it more impactful.
The mariachi band. Wonderful. That's great.
Yeah, I don't. All of his points, I'm just like, I don't know, buddy. That's stretching it.
I think he's misinterpreting things.
Well, he's not looking at the essence of what makes a scene work. He's just sort of understanding it from his weird, I don't know, perspective. It just doesn't make too much sense to me. Anyway, an example of death with unresolved plot is Jon Snow. That's true. And then he's brought back instantly. So let's read some more Looking for Alaska. Let's go back to the thing I know about, because I can't talk about Game of Thrones anymore. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Some characters' fates are worse than death, such as communism.
Yes.
Is that what robot is that? Is that
that Liberty Prime?
Is it? No, it doesn't look like him. That's a pretty.
I can't recognize it either.
That's a pretty articulated Liberty Prime. It could be
the ramped up version.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know.
Maybe.
Anyway, well, sadly, that was. I would give that an E+.
What is an
E?
Is that a thing?
Well, if I were to go a scale from A to F, E+ is probably, it's not a fail.
There is no E.
I mean,
they don't make E's because you can turn an F into an E too easily.
Yeah.
Video games use E instead of F. So.
Yeah. Well. Damn, that was bad. Okay, yeah, that was.
It was confusing.
It was as if he was taking it from 3 different perspectives and trying to explain one idea that he might have thought of, and then he asked other people for giving him ideas. I'm like, oh, that's not going to work out well. Ugh.
I mean, even he said it himself. It's like nothing I said matters.
I feel like replying to this guy, but I'll try and do it the nicest way possible, because he obviously wants to talk about the topic, but man, he just went about it. Usually when we talk about issues, we want to find the principle of the thing we're trying to figure out, the element that makes the thing function a certain way. Like, why do you cry? Why does this character work the way it does and it doesn't work in other stories? That's what we want to find out, that formula. Not to say it's a perfect formula, but it's just the way it worked in one scenario, like in Gladiator. Why did Gladiator work? And there's lots of reasons why. The cinematography, the music, the use of repetition, meaning the flashback or the foreshadowing of his death, what it means to him, what life means to him now that he's seeking vengeance, why he's seeking vengeance, and why we like his character. Once you identify all those things, you can understand why his death has value. And then you say, why doesn't this work with a side character? Why doesn't this work with a villain? And then you figure out it all comes down to plot. Once you know the plot of these characters and how they function in a narrative, everything becomes a lot more clear. So.
And then Dunn is character reset for no fucking reason.
Let's force drama, yeah. Let's cause.
In isolation, that like end of tense arc, there's like it was at least at the very least entertaining to watch.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the whole what will happen now thing. Aside from regeneration, which was obvious from the start.
Well, giving a YouTuber an excuse to talk about a fate worse than death or some nonsense, you're like, that's not the point.
That's a very tame thing, to be honest.
I don't know.
Yeah, in terms of the video, it made absolutely no sense. In isolation,
being stuck in horrid 10-second long time loops of absolute horror. That is a fate worse than death.
What, Doctor Strange?
Well,
no, was that a thing in Doctor Strange?
Well,
at the end when he trapped Dormammu in a time loop.
That thing. Yeah.
Dormammu, I've come to bargain. I mean, hey, it worked. God.
Yeah. That's you could almost say that's a comedic variant of that. There's in Wheel of Time, there's a torture scene like that, and also a horror scene in the beginning of the second book that follows that in a way. And outside of that, severe PTSD is something like that, because you repeatedly go through the most horrid memories you have, and that includes the emotional pain you have with it. It's not just seeing and reliving the memories. It's physically painful, and doing that without end, that can be considered like these time loop traps. And that is something that is why people with that condition tend to choose death at times if they don't get help.
All right, guys. Well, that was for me, that was great because I love talking about this stuff. And
one more the last minute stream meme if you want to look at it.
There's one more. Oh no.
Just one more. Yeah.
All right, let me see it. These are the rules on how to write death scenes.
Looks at it and then immediately throws it away into the fire.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now that's it.
All right, good enough for me. All right, thanks, guys. We'll talk to you real soon. Have a great